Okay, so in this lecture we are going to look at the notion of dependence and independence of a set of vectors. So if you're given a set of vectors, what are the constraints that these set of vectors come up with, right? So, and the concept that we introduce here will have very important consequences, which we will explore in the lectures which will come ahead. Okay, so let's hark back to 2D vectors, simple two-dimensional vectors that we are all familiar with. So if you have any arbitrary vector in the two-dimensional plane, right, which it's something that we take for granted, can be written as can be expressed in terms of some scalar along some magnitude along the x direction plus some other scalar quantity times the y direction. There is a unit vector along the y direction and a unit vector along the x direction. So, but in fact, any generic two vectors which live in a certain plane, right, can act as these vectors in terms of which any other vector in that space can be represented, right? So as long as they are not parallel, they are not in the same direction or in the opposite direction, it's possible to write down any other vector in that plane in terms of these two vectors, right? So in fact, let's go ahead and show this. I already have this statement. Show that any vector in a plane can be written as a linear combination of two non-parallel vectors A and B, right? So if you want to pause the video and try to work this out for yourself, covering whatever little is already showing up in my solution of this, please do so, right? So we want to write V as some V1 times A plus V2 times B, right? We don't know what V1 and V2 is, and we are only given some two vectors A and B, arbitrary vectors. We are told that they are non-parallel, right? So they are non-parallel, so there is a cross product of these two vectors, right? So I assume that all of us are familiar with the notion of a cross product. I didn't explicitly define it for two-dimensional vectors, although I did use the dot product because I think we are all sort of familiar with this from high school. So I will take this for granted and say that given that these two vectors A and B are not parallel, therefore there is a cross product that we can find. It's not going to be zero, right? And it's going to represent the direction perpendicular to the plane, right? So this is also something which I think is not surprising. None of what I'm saying right now is going to be surprising, but I'm just putting it in a form which is kind of abstract and which will open up ways for us to make more general statements for linear vector spaces. Okay, so A cross B is a vector which is going to be perpendicular to both A and B, right? And that's the point. So if you are able to find a vector which is perpendicular to both A and B, you have managed to define the plane. So if there are two vectors which live in this plane and which are not parallel are enough to define the plane. Therefore, any other vector is going to be representable in terms of these two vectors, right? So let's explicitly find that. So you take the cross product and divide by its magnitude. You only care about this direction. You have found this direction which is perpendicular to the plane, and now we can go ahead and use this information, right? So V1, so if I take the cross product of this vector V with respect to A, then only one of these two terms will survive. It's going to be V2 times B cross A, because A cross A is 0. And then we can take the inner product, the dot product, dot product of this equation on both sides with this unit vector n, and then of course the right hand side is going to be a dot product of B cross A with respect to n, which will just be equal to modulus of A cross B with a negative sign, right? So because A cross B is equal to minus B cross A, and then you just bring that to the other side, and therefore you are able to write down this explicit expression V2 is equal to minus dot product of this vector V cross A dotted with n, and then you have to divide by A cross B. So you're given any vector V, and I'm telling you what its component along B must be. I have to take a cross product of this vector with A, and then dot it with this direction which I have defined for you because I know A and B, and then I have to divide by this modulus of this A cross B. And likewise, we can go ahead and compute V1, the component of this vector V along the direction A, right? So that's just given by the dot product of V cross B with N divided by the modulus of A cross B, right? So thus we have this explicit representation where I can write V as, this component along A plus this component along B, right? It turns out to be negative, and this is the way I have written it, but basically the point is I have shown you explicitly what V1 and V2 are, right? So what it tells us is, if you're looking at two-dimensional vectors, any two non-parallel vectors are enough to give you every other vector in this space, right? Although there are infinitely many vectors in this space, right? So you're thinking of a box or a set of vectors, but the number of elements in the set is actually infinite. But you don't need an infinite number of elements to represent any of these. You can represent it in terms of just two vectors, and those two can be any two vectors as long as they're not parallel, and that's what this is telling us. Of course, the coefficients that you can choose, V1 and V2, are, there are infinitely many possibilities. So that's how you are able to generate an infinite number of vectors, an infinite space, using just two vectors which form what is called a basis, right? I'm getting ahead of myself, but we will define this a little more precisely in a future lecture. Okay, so next I want to define the concept of linear dependence, right? So I said, I don't want these vectors which are parallel and so on, right? So that's where the precise notion that we want to use here is that of linear dependence. So a set of vectors is said to be linearly dependent if some linear combination of them is 0, right? If they are parallel, then a linear combination of them is going to be 0, right? If on the other hand, okay, there we go. If on the other hand, if for a set of vectors it's impossible to find such a linear combination that adds up to 0, then they are linearly independent. So examples, this Ex, Ey and Ez are linearly independent vectors, right? So it's impossible to find a set of non-zero coefficients. You can of course take 0 times Ex plus 0 times Ey plus 0 times Ez equal to 0. That's possible. But the point is that whenever, if at all, if you're looking for some three coefficients, Ax and Ay and Az, such that Ax, Ex plus Ay plus Az, Ez, if that has to be 0, then Ax equal to Ay equal to Az. All three are 0. On the other hand, Ex, Ey and Ex plus Ey are linearly dependent, because the third vector can be written as the sum of the first and the second. So you have this relation which makes them linearly dependent, right? So this notion can be extended to abstract linear vectors. So the definition is like what you would expect. Consider some n vectors, 1, 2, all the way up to n. They are linearly independent if the relation summation over some product, some coefficient I, if this sum equal to 0 necessarily implies that all these coefficients must be 0. The only way you can satisfy a relation like this is if all these coefficients are 0, right? Then it means that you have pulled out a set of vectors which are linearly independent. So, and if a set of vectors is not linearly independent, then it becomes a linearly dependent set, right? So that's how you define a linearly dependent set. Now, so there is an immediate consequence of this, which I will show, and then we will stop with this lecture. So if there are n non-null vectors, 1, 2, 3, so on, all the way up to n, and if they are linearly dependent, then at least one of them can be expressed as a linear combination of the others, right? I mean, it's not a surprise once you have seen the argument, but look at the way one develops the argument systematically. It is for that purpose that this is instructive, right? So we go back to the definition of linear dependence, right? So these vectors are linearly dependent. You have n vectors, so there for sure you'll be able to find a set of coefficients a1, a2 all the way up to an, and such that at least one of them must be non-zero, right? If all of them are zero, then that's not linear dependence, right? If there's at least one of them which is non-zero, such that a1 1 plus a2 2 so on all the way up to a and n is zero. Now we are given for sure that at least one of these coefficients is non-zero, and so without loss of generality we can assume that a1 is non-zero, right? You call that which is non-zero as a1, and that vector corresponding to it will be 1, right? Then we can divide throughout. So the point is that if there is one of these coefficients is non-zero, then it's legitimate to divide throughout by this coefficient a1, and then you can express 1 as minus 1 over a1 times all of this stuff on the right hand side. Of course, all the other coefficients are free to be 0. If they are 0, then this vector 1 itself will turn out to be 0. But the point is that, and there is a division done with respect to division by a1, and a1 is taken to be non-zero, right? And we are guaranteed that there is such an a1, right? And that's why there is at least one vector which can be represented as a linear combination of all the other vectors in that set, right? You can have more than one, of course, right? And so anyway, it's not a surprise when you have thought about this a little more and you know got the flavor of what linear independence means, what linear dependence means. But it's important to go over this systematically, because we will use some of these properties. This notion very critically will show up in our discussions ahead, right? Thank you. That's all for this lecture.